Hello, brothers and sisters. Today's topic is Babylon the Great. Books have been written on this subject. There are many ideas floating out on the internet. Who is Babylon the Great? Let's start with the scriptures. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Go out from her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, that you receive not of her plagues. O Zion, flee, thou that dwellest with the daughter of Babylon. O flee ye out of the land of the north, saith the Lord. For I have scattered you into the four winds of heaven, saith the Lord. O Zion, flee, thou that dwellest with the daughter of Babylon. Depart, depart, go ye out from thence, touch no unclean thing, go out of the midst of her. Be ye clean, you that carry the vessels of the Lord. Remove out of the midst of Babylon. Go forth out of the land of the Chaldeans, and be ye as kids at the head of the flock. Flee ye from the midst of Babylon. Let every one save his own life. Be not silent upon her iniquity, for it is the time of revenge from the Lord. He will I render unto her what she hath deserved. We would have cured Babylon, but she is not healed. Let us forsake her. Let us go every man to his own land, because her judgment hath reached even to the heavens, and is lifted up to the clouds. Go out of the midst of her, my people, that every man may save his life from the fierce wrath of the Lord. And what concord hath Christ with Belial? And what part hath the faithful with the unbeliever? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For you are the temple of the living God, as God saith, I will dwell in them and walk among them. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore, go out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing." Brothers and sisters, this is the command to those who would follow the Lord. For God's cup of wrath overfloweth, and his punishment will be visited upon the nations. Now, due to the sheer amount of research I had to do to make this video, I've had to cut it short. So if you need to actually read some of the Bible verses or some of the information I put on the screens, just go ahead and pause it and then continue watching the video when you're finished reading. Jeremiah 25, "For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, take the cup of wine of this fury at my hand, and thou shalt make all the nations to drink thereof, unto which I shall send thee." So, of course, the question is, who then is Babylon that we should have no part of it? Some Protestant Bible scholars have claimed that it is Catholicism, with the Pope at its head. Others surmise it's modern-day Iraq. Still others state Jerusalem. While a small portion claim that the Babylonian Empire will be rebuilt on the grounds of modern-day Iraq. The early church fathers believed it was pagan Rome. From Peter, "The church that is in Babylon, elected together with you, saluteth you, and so doth my son Mark." From Tertullian, Answers to the Jews, chapter 9, "So again, Babylon, in our own John, is a figure of the city Rome, as being equally great and proud of her sway, and triumphant over the saints." In Augustine, "Abraham was born, which was about 1200th year before Rome was founded, as it were another Babylon in the west." Again, "Rome herself is like a second Babylon. To be brief, the city of Rome was rounded, like another Babylon, and as it were, the daughter of the former Babylon." From Church History, Eusebius, Book 2, Chapter 15. "And Peter makes mention of Mark in his first epistle, which they say that he wrote in Rome itself, as indicated by him, when he calls the city by a figure, Babylon." Victorinus, 250 AD, Commentary on the Apocalypse. "The seven heads are the seven hills on which the woman sitteth, that is, the city of Rome." Hippolytus, Ancient Historian, year 170 to 36, Treatise on Christ and the Antichrist. "Tell me, blessed John, apostle and disciple of the Lord, what do thou see and hear concerning Babylon? Arise and speak, for it sent thee also into banishment." Rome banished John. And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto you the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Letters of St. Jerome. Read the Apocalypse of John. Consider what is sung therein of the woman arrayed in purple, and of the blasphemy written upon her brow, of the 7 mountains, of the many waters, and of the end of Babylon. Come out of her, my people, so the Lord says, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues. It is true that Rome has a holy church. The church has been preached there by an apostle. Heathenism has been trodden down. The name of Christian is daily exalted higher and higher. But the display, power, and the size of the city, the seeing and the being seen, the paying and the receiving of visits, the alternate flattery and detraction, talking and listening, as well as the necessity of facing so great a throng, even when one is in the least mood to do so. All these things are alike foreign to the principles and fatal to the repose of monastic life. So St. Jerome also refers to Rome as Babylon. Tertullian. Rome, that powerful state which presides over the 7 mountains and very many waters, has merited from the Lord the appellation of a prostitute. Well, brothers and sisters, the problem with the ancient pagan Roman Empire idea is that we know from ancient history that Rome, ancient pagan Rome, did not receive all the punishments that awaited the great whore of Babylon, namely earthquakes, drought, captivity, pestilence, famine, flooding, or hailstones, although it did receive the punishments of being burnt, sacked, and invaded. Neither was the prophecy fulfilled regarding it being so desolate that no one would live there and no stone would be taken from there. Even today you can go to Rome. Revelations 18. Therefore shall plagues come in one day, death, mourning, famine. She shall be burnt with fire, because God is strong. Who shall judge her? The sea is come up over Babylon. She is covered with the multitude of the waves. The fruits of the desire of thy soul are departed from thee. All fat and goodly things are perished. They shall find them no more at all. It shall no more be inhabited forever. They should not take of thee a stone for the corner, nor a stone for foundations. Bottom line is, Rome, although it was destroyed, did not suffer all the punishments promised for the whore of Babylon. This is also supposed to be a desert. How is the hammer of the whole earth broken and destroyed? How is Babylon turned into a desert among the nations? She's supposed to receive drought. A drought upon her waters. They shall be dried up, because it is a land of idols, and they glory in monstrous things. Her cities are becoming an astonishment, a land uninhabited and desolate, a land where none can dwell, nor son of man pass through it. Therefore we know that neither ancient pagan Rome or Iraq can be the great whore spoken of, because they are as of yet inhabited, while no one was to inhabit the great whore after the destruction. So why did the early church fathers insist it was pagan Rome? Because pagan Rome fulfilled all of the criteria of the whore. So let's enumerate these one by one. First of all, it had graven idols and pagan gods that were worshipped. Isaiah 21:9. Behold, this man cometh, the rider upon the chariot with 2 horsemen, and he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, she is fallen, and all the graven gods thereof are broken unto the ground. Again, Isaiah 46. Bel is broken, Nebo is destroyed. Their idols are put in upon beasts and cattle, your burdens of heavy weight, even unto weariness. They're consumed and are broken together. They could not save him that carried them, and they themselves shall go into captivity. Jeremiah 50. Drought upon our waters, they shall be dried up. It is a land of idols, and they glory in monstrous things. All right, point number 2. Not only was it a land of pagan idols, but it was the key commercial city and engine of wealth for the world's economy. We have a lot of passages that talk about this. Go ahead and read them at your convenience. They range from Isaiah to Revelation. In these passages, we see just what relationship Babylon enjoys for the rest of the world. Here she is clearly a critical factor in the world economy. When she goes down in flames, what is the lament? What has like gone to this mega city? Who will buy our goods now that she is gone? The answer is no one will be able to buy the products of the world's merchants. What does this tell us? It should be a clear warning indicator that whoever this nation is, the rest of the world depends on her for buying their merchandise. With her destruction, there is no one left to buy their goods. That tells us just how vital this nation is, and it means that this nation is the engine of wealth for the world. Now, Iraq does not and cannot currently fit that role. Neither modern Vatican, nor Iraq, nor the current city of Rome are the key engines of wealth for the world economy. Point number 3. The blood of all the prophets in every nation on earth shall be on her head. Revelations 18:24. In her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and of all that were slain upon the earth. Even when we take into account the Crusades, which were a result of the atrocities initiated by Muslims against Christians, the Catholic Church does not fit the bill of having the blood of every nation on earth. Nor does Iraq. Now, in retrospect, the U.S. definitely has blood on its hands for its roles in the massacres in Indonesia in October 1965, Gwangju, El Mozote, Yemen, thousands of others, not including the Indians, Trail of Tears, and the relentless slaughter of babies in abortion. The United States currently has soldiers fighting in 76 different countries, or 39% of the world. I've included a map so you can see where. This does not even take into account the weapons and training the United States gives to blatantly anti-Christian countries like Saudi Arabia and Turkey that butcher more Christians than any other countries. They have a track record of killing Christians with the very arms they receive from the United States. Nor does it take into account the terrorist groups such as the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, Mujahideen that are trained and funded by the CIA. Nor does it take into account this group of ISIS that was actually trained and funded by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, which is documented. Truly, the blood of every nation on earth can be found in the United States of America. However, from a biblical standpoint, the truth may be even simpler. Matthew 23:34. Therefore, behold, I send to you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you will put to death and crucify, and some you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city, that upon you may come all the just blood that have been shed upon the earth, from the blood of Abel the just, even unto the blood of Zachariah the son of Barachias, whom you killed between the temple and the altar. See, according to Jesus, the Jews had the blood of every nation on earth and the prophets on their hands, and their response to Pilate later was, may his blood, Jesus, be upon us and upon our children. Therefore, Babylon will have a high percentage of Jews living there. Which brings us to the next point. The Jewish population. Jeremiah 50, 51, Isaiah, and Revelation all talk about the quantity of Jews that lived in Babylon. So Jeremiah 51, verse 5. For Israel and Judah have not been forsaken by their God, the Lord of hosts, but their land hath been filled with sin against the Holy One of Israel. Flee from the midst of Babylon, let everyone save his own life. Be not silent upon her iniquity, for it is a time of revenge from the Lord. He will I render unto her which she hath deserved. So once again, the Jews who lived in there refer to Babylon as their land. So these are all references to Jewish people living in this future mystery Babylon. In the ancient Babylon, from the 6th century BC till well into the early church age, the majority of the Jewish population lived in ancient Babylon. It was the home to most of the world's Jews, even in the time of Christ. Today, The second largest population of Jewish people is found in the United States. According to Wikipedia, not always accurate, but at least to give you an idea, with just over 6.5 million Jews, Israel is the only Jewish majority in an explicitly Jewish state. Jewish population for the United States are contested, ranging from 5.7 and 6.8 million. So once again, the Jewish population question disqualifies both the Vatican, Rome, and Iraq. Now, if we substitute Jews for true followers of Christ, for St. Paul says in Romans chapter 2, for it is not he who is a Jew who is so outwardly, nor is that circumcision which is outwardly in the flesh, but he is a Jew that is one inwardly, and the circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. So St. Paul references Jews as true followers of Christ and servants of the Lord. So if we substitute Jews for followers of Christ and Babylon for the Catholic Church, then we have to accept that the majority of the true followers of Christ can be found in the Catholic Church, which is also an idea not palatable or acceptable to Protestants. Once again, the current Iraq and the Catholic Church are disqualified using the literal Jew equation. Of course, if we look at the followers of Christ scenario, well, one has to make the point that the United States claims or claimed to be a Christian nation, with the words "in God we trust" on its money. And of course the words of Trump, "Here in America we worship God, not government." All right, let's move on to the next point. The chief city of Mystery Babylon is a deep water port city. Revelations 18:17-19. This past tells us that merchant ships are standing off the shoreline of Babylon. These ships have either just unloaded in the port city of Mystery Babylon or are waiting to dock when the fiery judgment hits. These ship captains, crew, and passengers are witnesses to the destruction. So the question is, why would these folks be standing on the deck of merchant ships unless there were port facilities in the city? The answer is, the city is a port city. In this day and age, especially by virtue of the list of commodities that are traded in Mystery Babylon, Revelations 18, verse 11, there must be at least one deep water port in the nation of Mystery Babylon. One thing can be noted regarding to modern day port facilities. In order for Babylon to have the kind of merchandise described in Revelations 18 coming by ships, then those ships must be going to and from a deep water sea port city. Why? For today's ships to bring such merchandise requires them to be large commercial freighters with deep drawing drafts. These ships require deep water port facilities to dock and load and unload because their holes are so deep. These are big ships. There is no port city in Iraq, and the closest to the Vatican is 50 miles away. Once again, that rules out the modern day Catholic Church with the Vatican and Iraq. Commodities Trading Center. It is a commodities trading center and the chief commodities trading center. All right, Revelations chapter 18, verse 11 through 13 lists the many commodities that are traded in ancient Babylon. So these are all commodities in a list. They're the chief trading products for which the merchants and sailors later lament that no one will buy these products anymore. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man shall buy their merchandise anymore. Merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones, and of pearls and fine linen, purple and silk, and scarlet and all fine wood, all manner of vessels of ivory, all manners of vessels of precious stone, of brass, and of iron, and of marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointment, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. Now, this includes gold, silver, and copper. Now, on these items alone, there is more gold traded in New York City on the COMEX in one day than all the rest of the world combined. The same is true for silver and copper and crude oil. That is how massive and dominant the USA and New York City are in the commodities trading markets. Revelations 18, 12, and 13 list many other commodities as well, including grains and livestock. Now, Chicago is a host city for such record trading in that arena. It too is a port city, as it sits on Lake Michigan. The fact of the matter, Iraq has no economic power, and the Vatican has a deficit of over 12 million even after all of the donations. However, if the USA vanished today, it would decimate the world's economy and bankrupt every nation on the earth instantly. Okay, next point. The whore is a leading center of imports and consumption. Chapter 18, verses 17 through 19 in Revelation. These passages tell us that the economic picture of this nation, that this nation is not only involved in the trade of these products, but that she is also the leading importer. Because when she is destroyed, no one buys their merchandise anymore. The folks during the lamenting are the international merchants who export goods to this mystery Babylon. Therefore, she is the leading import nation. She is therefore, by virtue of her importer status, the chief consuming nation. Once again, this rules out the Vatican and Iraq. There is only one nation that fits these traits and more. That nation is the United States of America. But let's keep going. Next point. She contaminates the whole earth with her worship of immorality, pleasure, luxury, occult, and paganism. All right, Revelation 18, verse 3 states, because all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have been made rich by the power of her delicacies. Hosea chapter 2, verse 5. For their mother hath committed fornication. She that conceived them is covered with shame. For she said, I will go after my lovers, that give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink. And she did not know that I gave her corn and wine and oil, and multiplied her silver and gold, which they have used in the service of Baal. So here, God is lamenting that the whore of Babylon is going after pagan gods instead of recognizing that everything they have received comes from him. See, Babylon was supposed to be married to God. We know that because it says that she was a cup in the hand of the Lord. Jeremiah 57. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the hand of the Lord, that made all the earth drunk. The nations have drunk of her wine, and therefore they have staggered. See, the golden cup signified marriage. Notice that instead of the wine of love of God, her cup is filled with fornication, idolatry, and witchcraft. Revelations 2:22 continues with the marriage analogy. Behold, I will cast her into a bed, and they that commit adultery with her shall be in very great tribulation, except they do penance from their deeds. So here we paint a picture that while Babylon is destroyed, the nations of the earth that have committed adultery with her will be in tribulation, and they will need to do penance lest they be destroyed as well. Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 26 is even more explicit. You have also committed fornication with the Egyptians, your neighbors. In other words, the Egyptian gods. Great of flesh. Have increased your whoredoms to provoke me to anger. You have played the whore also with the Assyrians. These are the false gods of the Babylonians. Because you are insatiable. Yes, you have played the harlot with them, and yet couldst not be satisfied. How weak is thine heart, saith the Lord God, seeing you doest all these things, the work of an imperious, whorish woman, in that you buildest thine eminent places in the head of every way, and makest thine high place in every street, and have not been as a harlot in that you scornest hire, but is a wife that committeth adultery, which taketh strangers instead of her husband. Ezekiel 23:36. Because they have committed adultery, and blood is in their hands. They have committed fornication with their idols. Moreover also their children, whom they bore to me, they have offered to them to be devoured. Yea, and they have done this to me. They have polluted my sanctuary on the same day, and profaned my Sabbaths. So here we have a picture that the great whore of Babylon has fornicated with the kings of the earth by worshiping or following the false gods of the other nations, that it honors not the day of the Lord, that those children, which are gods, they have offered them to be killed. Now let's contrast this to the faithful bride. Once again, Babylon the Great was meant to be the spouse of God, but instead she goes after strange gods. All right, so let's take a look at what a faithful bride looks like. Revelations 19:7 and 9. Let us be glad and rejoice, and give glory to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath prepared herself. It is granted to her that she clothe herself with fine linen, glittering and white. For the fine linen are the justifications of saints. And he said to me, Write, blessed are they that are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he saith to me, These words of God are true. Isaiah 62 continues the analogy. For as a young man marrieth a virgin, so shall thy sons marry thee. As the bridegroom rejoiceth over the bride, so shall thy God rejoice over thee. See, brothers, fornication is not only sexual immorality, but is actually turning away from marriage to Christ and complete submission and love for him to idolatry, which is to follow the flesh or the things of this earth. Colossians 3:5. Mortify therefore your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, lust, evil concupiscence, and covetousness, other translations say greed, which is the service of idols. So I'm going to repeat that. These things, fornication, uncleanness, lust, evil concupiscence, greed, this is idolatry. Now let's compare this to what the bride of Christ looks like. Ephesians 5:22. Let women be subject to their husbands as to the Lord. We are to be subject to the Lord in the laws of the Lord. Because the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of his body. Those that follow Christ have Christ as their head. Not materialism, not all the things that consume people today. Therefore, as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives be to their husband in all things. 2 Corinthians 11:2. For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I've espoused you to one husband, that I might present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. We're to have only one husband. That is Christ. Not the world, not the flesh, and most definitely not the devil. See, brothers and sisters, for just as sexual immorality is the worst type of physical sin, 1 Corinthians 6:18, fly fornication, every sin that a man doth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body, the body of Christ. Or know you not that your members are the temple of the Holy Ghost, who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own? For just as sexual immorality is the worst type of physical sin, idolatry or spiritual fornication, making something that is not God the center of a life, whether that thing is money, fame, sports, fitness, video games, cars, houses, success, liberty, politics, education. This spiritual fornication or idolatry is the worst spiritual sin. For what is the greatest commandment? You shall love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, thy whole mind, and thy whole strength. First commandment, I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not have other gods besides me. God does not want us to serve anything, only him. So if we ask ourselves, is there anything in my life that I put more emphasis on than God, that I spend more time, I'm more obsessed with, it occupies more time in my mind? That is your idol. God is a jealous God. He wants to sit on our heart and reign as king and not share his throne with anything else. Let's continue. The next mark of the great whore of Babylon. She is filled with occult aspects and astrology, especially within the governmental leadership. Okay, we have evidence of this in Isaiah 47:11. These two things shall come upon thee suddenly in one day, barrenness and widowhood. All things are come upon thee, because of the multitude of thy sorceries, and for the great hardness of thy enchanters. Stand now with thine enchanters, with the multitude of thy sorceries, in which thou hast labored from thy youth, if so be it may profit thee anything, or if thou mayest become stronger. But thou hast failed in the multitude of thy counsels. Let now the astrologers stand and save thee, they that gazed at the stars and counted the months, that from them they might tell the things that shall come to thee. So once again, Babylon was a nation that had astrology and the occult. Again, Nahum, chapter 3, verse 4. Because the multitude of the fornication of the harlot, that was beautiful and agreeable, and that made use of witchcraft, that sold nations through her fornications, and families through her witchcrafts. To anyone who opens their eyes, the United States is permeated with the occult in movies, government, video games, songs, and everything that is exported. Yet the biggest thing that glamorizes other nations is the promise of wealth and pleasure and personal freedom. Its very foundation is on the occult, as will be shown later. Below are some forms of sorcery that are mentioned in the Bible. Note also that rebellion and disobedience are the same as sorcery in God's eyes. 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 23. Because it is like the sin of witchcraft to rebel, and like the crime of idolatry to refuse to obey. For as much therefore as thou hast rejected the word of the Lord hath also rejected thee from being king. Now if we look at the physical aspect, anyone under the influence of drugs would appear to be under a spell due to hallucinations, etc. So if we look at sorcery as drug use, well, we all know the United States leads the world in substance abuse. Okay, let's go back to a verse here. Note that she is agreeable and attractive. So this is a city or a nation that the whole earth flocks to. They're in awe of it. See, once again, this rules out authentic Catholicism that teaches fasting, penance, and renunciation of the world and the flesh, since this is anything but agreeable and attractive. From the Catechism of the Catholic Church, quote, "The Catholic Church teaches that all people are obliged by God to perform some penance for their sins, and that these acts of penance are both personal and corporeal. The purpose of fasting is spiritual focus, self-discipline, imitation of Christ, and performing penance." Verse 2096, "Adoration is the first act of the virtue of religion. To adore God is to acknowledge him as God, as the creator and savior, the Lord and master of everything that exists, as infinite and merciful love. You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve," says Jesus, citing Deuteronomy. 2097 states, "To adore God is to acknowledge in respect and absolute submission the nothingness of the creature who would not exist but for God. To adore God is to praise and exalt him and to humble oneself as Mary did in the Magnificat, confessing with gratitude that he has done great things and holy is his name. The worship of the one God sets man free from turning in on himself, from the slavery of sin and the idolatry of the world." Once again, the teachings of authentic Catholicism are against the idolatry of the world. Therefore, authentic Catholicism is not beautiful and agreeable, or agreeable and attractive to those of the earth. Now, if we look at apostate Catholicism, or those who are committing scandals, it also rules out non-authentic Catholicism, because there's nothing attractive about the scandals in the Catholic Church. No one looks at the scandals among priests or laity and goes, "Wow, look at that. I want to be part of that religion that has that sinfulness." So once again, this is not Catholicism, either authentic or non-authentic, when being described by the great whore of Babylon. It does not fit the agreeable and attractive. All right, next point. She is a nation of immigrants that people flock to. Jeremiah 50:16 says, "Destroy the sower out of Babylon, and him that holdeth the sickle in the time of harvest, for fear of the sword of the dove. Every man shall return to his people, and every one shall flee to his own land." Okay, once again, Babylon is composed of immigrants. Again, Jeremiah 51:13. "O thou that dwellest upon many waters, rich in treasure, thy end is come for thy entire destruction." Now, waters is explained as meaning peoples by the angel in Revelation. Revelation 17, chapter 1. "And there came one of the seven angels who had the seven vials, and spoke with me, saying, Come, I will show thee the condemnation of the great harlot, who sitteth upon many waters." Revelation 17:15 explains, "And he said to me, The waters which thou sawest where the harlot sitteth are peoples and nations and tongues." So the great harlot is composed of different nations and peoples and tongues. No other nation receives the quantity of immigrants as the USA, many of whom die just to enter the United States. Just take a look at the great caravans. Let's continue. She's also a manufacturing nation. Revelations 18:22. "And the voice of harpers and of musicians and of them that play on the pipe, on the trumpet, shall no more be heard at all in thee. No craftsman of any art whatsoever shall be found any more at all in thee. The sound of the mill shall be heard no more at all." Jeremiah 24. "The Lord showed me, behold, two baskets full of figs set before the temple of the Lord, After that, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away Jeconiah, the son of Joachim, the king of Judah, his chief men, and the craftsmen, and the engravers of Jerusalem, and brought them to Babylon. 2 Kings 24:16. All the strong men, 7,000, and the artificers, and the smiths, 1,000, all that were valiant men and fit for war, and the king of Babylon led them captives into Babylon. So once again, Babylon, the whore of Babylon, is also full of manufacturing. So Revelation tells us that manufacturing is no longer found in her after the judgment. This tells us she was a manufacturing nation prior to her destruction. Again, neither Iraq nor the Catholic Church are noted for manufacturing. All right, she's also center for merchandising and marketing. Revelations 18:23. And the light of the lamp shall no more shine at all in thee. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For all nations have been deceived by thy enchantments. Again, Revelations 18:19. They cast dust upon their heads and cried, weeping and mourning, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein all were made rich that had ships at sea, by reason of her prices. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. See, her merchants were the mega merchants of the earth. This, again, does not fit the character traits of Iraq or the Vatican. It does, however, fit the picture of America. If that is not obvious, let's keep going. She was known as the world's policeman and a military power. How do we know that? Jeremiah 50:23. How is the hammer of the whole earth broken and destroyed? How is Babylon turned into a desert among the nations? Jeremiah 50:23 gives us a Hebrew idiom, hammer of the whole earth. It had been used at one time to describe the way the empires of Persia, Greece, and Rome had applied their power to keep the world at peace. Today, after the decline and fall of the Iron Curtain, major news media refer to America as the world's policeman, in the same kind of role that the Hebrew idiom references. No other than the United States fits this role. Next point. She's extremely wealthy. That should be obvious. Jeremiah 51:13, Revelations 18:2 through 19. We know she has clothes of scarlet and gold. The whole earth talks about how wealthy she is. So we'll just get past that because that was obvious. All right, next point. Sensual materialistic lifestyle in the highest living standards. Isaiah 47:8. Now hear these things. Thou that art delicate and dwellest confidently, that sayest in thy heart, I am, there is none else besides me. I shall not sit as a widow. I shall not know barrenness. Again, Revelations 18:14. The fruits of the desire of thy soul are departed from thee, and all fat and goodly things are perished from thee. They shall find them no more at all. Again in Isaiah 47:1, come down, sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon, sit on the ground. There is no throne for the daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt be no more called delicate and tender. So once again, this great whore of Babylon is used to the high life. She is also a world example to emulate. She has an intoxicating high society lifestyle. So Revelation 17:2, we also have 18:3, 14, and 23. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, they who inhabit the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her whoredom. Once again, they've been made drunk with her wine. They are intoxicated by her lifestyle. Revelations 18:14 and 23. Let's continue. She is noted for exporting its culture abroad. Revelations 18:14, 22. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, Mother of Fornications, and the Abominations of the Earth. On her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, Mother of Fornications, and the Abominations of the Earth. So once again, the fornication, sinfulness, and abomination originated from Babylon. She's also noted for being wasteful and extravagant. Revelations 18, 3, 7, 9, 14, and 15. I'll let you look at those. She also has a massive population. Also 18:15, Revelation 17. We'll continue because those points are obvious. She's next point, big one. She dominates, is envied by, and yet is hated by the whole world. Revelation 17, 1 through 16. Here's understanding that hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains upon which the woman sitteth, and they are 7 kings. So once again, she dominates or sits on 7 heads, 7 kings, or 7 mountains. The 10 horns which thou sawest in the beast, these shall hate the harlot, shall make her desolate and naked, shall eat her flesh, shall burn her with fire. So we know that these nations, these kings, they shall hate the whore. Now, of course, at this point, many people say, hey, look, Rome is on 7 hills. Therefore, she must be the Catholic Church. However, on closer inspection, we find that the Vatican actually only sits on Vatican Hill, which is not one of the 7 hills of Rome. However, if we look at the verse above, we find that the 7 mountains are not hills literally, but they are the 7 kings or nations of the earth that the whore rules over. 7 signifies completion. So this is a way of saying she rules over the whole earth. A reference to Isaiah illustrates an example of the word mountain being a reference to a nation. Isaiah 2, verse 2. And in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be prepared on top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. Obviously, we can't put one mountain on top of a bunch of other mountains. Translated, it means God's people will be exalted over all the nations of the earth, large and small, and all peoples will seek her out. This timeline, of course, occurs after the fall of the Antichrist during the 1,000-year reign of peace. Okay, let's continue. The next mark, she is powerful and oppressive. Isaiah 14, verse 4 through 6. Thou shalt take up this parable against the king of Babylon, and shalt say, how is the oppressor come to nothing? The tribute hath ceased. The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked, the rod of the rulers, that struck the people in wrath with an incurable wound, that brought nations under in fury, that persecuted in a cruel manner. So if we look at some examples of incurable wounds in reference to America, because there aren't any incurable wounds done by the Catholic Church or Iraq, one need only look at one of the recent examples. For example, the radioactive rounds that are left over in Iraq. In a 3-week period of conflict in Iraq during 2003, it was estimated that over 1,000 tons of depleted uranium munitions were used. More than 300,000 of these uranium rounds were fired during the 2003 war, the vast majority by United States troops. Now, it is believed by many that exposure to depleted uranium mounds, especially when a person inhales or ingests it as a particulate, cause severe and long-term health effects. Radiation is incurable. And of course, this does not take into account all the nations that have been devastated by the United States wars. We have countries that is still not recuperated as a result of the United States wars. Okay, let's continue. A land of agriculture. Jeremiah 50:16. Destroy the sower out of Babylon, and him that holdeth the sickle in the time of harvest. So Babylon is manufacturer, importer, a consumer, is a land of agriculture, international city. Okay, international city, Revelation 17:18. The woman thou sawest is the great city which hath kingdom over the kings of the earth. As international. It is also a land of rivers and lakes. Jeremiah 51:36. Therefore thus saith the Lord, behold, I will judge thy cause, and will take vengeance for thee. I will make her sea desolate, will dry up her spring. It is also all the world's leaders stream to meet. Jeremiah 51:44. I'll visit against Bel in Babylon. I'll bring forth out of his mouth that which he hath swallowed down. The nations shall no more flow together to him, for the wall also of Babylon shall fall. She has a wall. Continue. Last of the superpowers. Jeremiah 50:12, Revelation 17, Revelation 18. Talks about what city is like the mega city. So is the greatest. Okay, she also has no fear of invasion. Revelations 18. Sorrow I shall not see. It's also talked about in Isaiah. Okay, she also is filled with sin and a stronghold for satanic forces. He cried out with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, become the habitation of devils, the hold of every unclean spirit, and the hold of every unclean and eightfold bird. We'll talk a little bit more about the occult and the types of sins that are prevalent in Babylon. Let's continue. Its national symbol, a pagan goddess of freedom and licentiousness. Let's continue. She's very arrogant. Revelations 18. I sit a queen, I am no widow, sorrow I shall not see. Oh, just a note, some of this material was borrowed from a gentleman by the name of R.A. Combs, who wrote a book. Although I do not agree with all of his points, some of the points he makes and the scriptural references have helped form a complete picture. So after reviewing the 30 marks of Babylon, it's actually more than 30, there exists no city, nation, system, or religion today that fulfills every single one save one, the United States of America. So let's go through these marks one more time, very quick, just a quick refresher. Okay, number 1. Had graven idols and pagan gods. We're going to get back to that. I will show you all the pagan gods and idols that are in the United States. Okay. Key commercial city, engine of wealth for the world's economy. Obvious. Blood of all the prophets, every nation on earth shall be on our head. Okay, we've got violence, bloodbaths, the role in selling of arms. But more importantly, we have the Jewish equation. All right, high population of Jews, second in the world. Chief city is a deep water port city. That was obvious. New York. Commodities trading center. Once again, obvious. Leading center of imports and consumption. Obviously. Manufacturing connection. Check. Center for merchandising and marketing. Check. Supposed to be married to God. Check. Look at all the people that claim that America is a Christian nation and put themselves up on a pedestal, or put America up a pedestal as the light of the earth to promoting the morals. Okay, we've got the next one. It is filled with occult aspects in astrology. Once again, we're going to get back to that. I will show that one. She is attractive. She's full of immigrants. She is a manufacturing nation. She is a center of merchandising and marketing, the world's policeman, extremely wealthy, high standard of living, sensual materialistic. She's a world example to emulate with a high society lifestyle, which everyone wants to have. She is noted for exporting its culture abroad, noted for being wasteful, massive population. She dominates. She's envied and hated by the whole world. She's powerful and oppressive. Land of agriculture, international, land of rivers and lakes, where the world's leaders stream to, last of the superpowers, no fear of invasion, filled with sin and a stronghold of the demonics. Its national symbol is that of a prostitute, which we will show shortly. She's very arrogant. So here come all the objections. No, that's impossible. First off, we're going to hear that the souls of men are trafficked in Babylon. The United States doesn't traffic in the souls of men. Revelation 18 says, cinnamon, odors, ointments, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, beasts, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, and souls of men. Some will say that not all the goods listed here are traded. Although there were slaves in the past, that was abolished 150 years ago. So it does not describe America. Ivory trade is also banned by the United States since 1990. So how could that fit America? It fits. If we leave behind our law-abiding mindset for a minute and consider the real world, America, like all nations, has modern-day slavery. There's human trafficking for sexual exploitation. Children, sexual slaves, are in over 19 different states. Forced labor, despite the laws against it. If you follow the news regularly, you'll occasionally read the tales of survivors or those who own slaves. Similarly, ivory trade may be illegal, but there's a black market for this in the U.S. too. More importantly, souls are bought through the allure of wealth, sex, power, and pleasure. Not to mention, if working 50 hours a week just to put food on the table, only living paycheck to paycheck, if that is not slavery, what is? Let's continue. America does too much good. Other nations are far worse. America is a Christian nation full of churches and Bibles. It sends out more Bibles and missionaries into the world than any other nation. It shares its wealth in the form of aid to the world. It hosts the United Nations. It says, in God we trust on the dollar. With all these good works, how could it be that God is going to judge her so harshly? Luke 12:47 has the answer. And that servant who knew the will of his Lord and prepared not himself and did not according to his will shall be beaten with many stripes. But he that knew not and did things worthy of stripes shall be beaten with few stripes. And unto whomsoever much is given, of him much shall be required. And to whom they have committed much, of him they will demand the more. See, other nations are just as sinful, but none are as flooded with gospel light as ours. God is going to judge America for its violence, its crimes, its backslidings, its murdering of millions of babies, its flaunting of homosexuality and sadomasochism, its corruption, its drunkenness and drug abuse, its materialism, its form of godliness without power, its lukewarmness towards Christ, its rampant divorce and adultery, its fornication, its swingers clubs, its lewd pornography, its sex shops, its child molestations, its cheatings, its robbery, its dirty movies, its occult practices. But what about all the missions, funded by the United States. True priorities can be judged by following the money trail. Our nation still spends more money each year for dog food than for missions. See, Revelations 18 talks about Babylon heavily influencing the rest of the world to sin and live for luxury. She deceives them to doing this with her sorcery. It's hard to appreciate how global America's wicked influence is until you live overseas, as I do. Everywhere you go, American culture is desired and imported. The violent, sexual, and immoral themes of American TV, movies, music, pornography reach nearly everywhere, even before the internet that America invented, which has now only made it worse. America is imitated like no other nation, and this brings wrath on America. When you consider how much this ugly scenario is the opposite of how a Christian nation should be influencing the world, then you can understand why God says he will judge America for her wickedness and depravity. The truth of the matter is, the United States is not a Christian nation. It never has been. Although there are some Christians that live there, just like pagan Rome, the very atmosphere is contaminated with sin and paganism. The early church fathers were correct in stating that ancient pagan Rome was the whore of Babylon, for in fact, pagan Rome had all of the marks at that time. We know it is not the whore spoken of in Revelation because it did not receive the prophesied punishments. It may surprise you to know that the United States was built in imitation of pagan Rome, and its founding fathers were anything but Christian. All right, I'm going to stop the video here for length, and we will continue in section 2. But just to talk a little bit and conclude this portion, the United States is the only entity in existence today that has every single mark of the great whore of Babylon. So let's continue in section 2.